So today we are sketching this scene, which comes from this busy reference photo, and it's a complicated sort of market, fruit and veg stall with a busy street behind, a photo taken in the evening in Norwich. And we're going to look at how we can simplify that, how we can take the essence, we can add some interesting loose colours and a continuous line sketching technique to produce an interesting urban sketch. So how are we going to do it? Well, nice portrait scene, capturing a bit of that sort of flow through the scene, simplifying and using a sort of continuous line drawing technique with my Lamy Safari. This is an extra fine nib, and that extra fine nib really makes a lot of difference because it means our lines stay thin, controlled. So without further ado, let's just start. I'm actually going to start right over at the edge here, just at the edge of that scene, the sign we can see at the edge. And I'm just going to work along, because we've got this kind of neat framing, haven't we? It's a really useful way of deciding how to start. If you're setting out to do something which is a bit continuous line, but experimental, is to try and get, you know, an obvious sort of silhouette or that kind of just outline started first. You can see I took my pen off the page briefly, and that's okay. I'm here to do continuous line. Not for the challenge of doing continuous line, but for the effect that it gives and the effect it makes me simplify. If that means occasionally I stretch my hands and I take my pen off the page, that's not a problem, because I'm not sort of trying to be clever and challenge myself. I'm just trying to use the effects it can generate. And if I do take the pen off, well, it's simple to keep the effect, because we just bring the pen back onto the page in the right sort of place, and then keep going, and then we can easily start just grabbing again those key shapes, and we can build them up. And if we come down and up and down, we can sort of start picking out objects that relate to each other. And I use objects loosely, because what I mean here is this man, for example, who's sort of bent over behind the parasol. We can do the parasol, then come back down and grab him, grab his shape. Going into the back here, we can do the same with our sort of fruit and veg, and we can now surround this fruit and veg man with his, appropriately enough, his fruit and veg. And there we go. So we kind of grabbed this really challenging part of the scene. There's a couple more little bits we can go around and grab though. So we've got this parasol, which is in the background. It kind of disappears behind the front one, doesn't it? But we can just bring our outline around, and then we get the top of this parasol. And it doesn't matter if we are overlapping like this. It doesn't matter if our lines go a bit wonky, skew if. In fact, that's exactly why I'm using this continuous line technique. It's so I can't control everything that's happening, so that I'm forced to make mistakes and forced to recover from those mistakes as well. We could keep going into the background. We've got loads more different shapes of fruit and veg just disappearing off. And it can just become a sort of mess of lines and shapes as we get further into the distance before we hit this rather fascinating tree. The tree we can give a bold outline by just going up and down, and then we can bring in its branches. And there we go. And we just keep working these branches in, and again, look, continuous line, no problem. And what it means is we're building in that kind of texture at the same time, which is why it's such a characterful way, I always think, to sketch. Just builds in a huge amount of interest very quickly. And there we go. Now we can use these branches and we can start looking at what's in the background. I say use these branches because we can come down from them. We can join them up to these sort of background large buildings, these grand buildings, and just build up this sort of background of our scene. And then we've got the silhouette. We can start bringing down these key sort of vertical lines. I call them key vertical lines because it's the vertical lines which make the, well, for me, that's what makes these buildings come alive. Before, they're just a sort of abstract shape in the background, but as soon as you bring those vertical lines down, you separate them out and you ground them, you bring them to the floor. We've also by doing so we can separate out some planes. So we've got this interesting area facing us, which is now separated out, come to life. And then we can also create some shapes here and start perhaps even building in just a few windows. We don't have to join all the windows up. Some of the windows can be separated. Remember, it's the feel of continuous line we're looking for, not a sort of zealous application of the process. So we can make decisions to lift up our pen occasionally, for example. And just by building in this kind of funny line quality, we can gradually build in the back of that scene. Now, what else is there in this building, in this image? Sorry, there's loads of people. And so we're just going to move around now. And we can grab them. We can make them little sort of loopy people. If you're at all interested, on Skillshare I did a sort of a whole class on how to capture crowds. Now, one of those methods I like using is these kind of loopy people. Now, it's great for joining people up, and all you're doing really is a couple of circles. You sort of grab a circle for a head, a circle for the body, and suggestions of the feet, and then actually a surprisingly effective way of building up a crowd, of simplifying down what a crowd looks like into the constituent shapes and overlapping lines. Something else just missing from this image is having this understanding of the foreground. So we can just build in a couple of lines which are kind of geometric and following the perspective. So we're kind of following the idea of lines broadening out as we get closer to them. Just bring those round, and we can sweep them round. If we curve them slightly, it gives that fisheye perspective coming towards us. And I think we are, at that point, pretty much done with our line drawing. We could just bring out a few little leaves, or even just make some nice sweeping suggestions that this is, you know, got something more than just those branches. But we can then call our sketch done, and we focus very much on this interesting area and give it a more abstract, loose background, but one that I think tells a lot of the story about what's going on. One thing I am going to do is just bolden this line here. So we get this parasol coming into the foreground, stepping away from those background areas. And then we can move on to adding some fun colour. So I'm going to actually start down in this area in our market, which is a sort of hubbub of colour, of lights, of fascinating things going on. So we're just going to come around, a little bit of green, a little bit of red, a little bit of sort of orange. We can add some dark colours in there and just let those things move. And I think what will be most interesting is if they escape. So if we give them some little paths to escape down. And that way we're just showing the celebration of colours and just really, I don't know, celebrating them more than just touching the colours in and trying to be specific or clever. We're now celebrating the presence of all these colours, letting them spill over. And then we can join them up here, and we can create more of a texture out of them. And when as they dry, they're going to sort of gradually fall away. So we can just go back in and bring out a couple more little bits and pieces. And now we've got this really fascinating foreground linking in to that fascinating background. A lot of the rest of the image is in a bit of shadow. So if we take some nice shadow colour, so I've got some moon glow here, we can sort of just fill in that shadow, and those colours are now going to bleed up. I'm going to leave our man as a bit of negative space, at least for now. That might change, but leaving negative space leaves you flexible to change your mind later. But if you go for it straight away, add colour, you might have overdone it. We've already got lots of intense colours bleeding and moving around, so let's give our image a little bit of time just to catch up with our ideas. I'd quite like some colour in this tree, and it's not really a green tree, is it? But we'll go for some nice warm brown. This is a quinacridone sienna, and we'll get some interesting effects by just making sure there's plenty of water. Again, that colour can just come down, it can link down, it can come into all of this, and it can pull into our foreground. So we've got this kind of monochrome versus polychrome versus colour image. I don't know if polychrome is a word. Someone can let me know in the comments if you get this far. Is polychrome a term? But I do want a little bit of green just to make sure we know. There are a few little leaves and things. And again, we've got this lovely flow going through, haven't we? Because everything's angled, because it's all flowing down. Got a nice little flow of colours and tones through the whole image. We can now start intensifying some of the shadows. So coming in with our moon glow and just finding those places we really want to show off the shadow. Again, still letting it all run down, keeping it as a nice glaze of colour, not too intense, not too opaque. We can find little touches of blue as well. Cobalt blue is a lovely colour which kind of sings through, and little touches like that will give a really nice glow. And we don't have to do too much, just let that do its thing. I normally do a lot of splashes. I'm going to do just a couple here. But I quite like the glazed look that we've got, so I don't want to introduce too much randomness outside of that. I think we can do a bit more tone inside the parasol though, to get that understanding, just a little bit more de-abstracting. See, it's very abstract, and that's absolutely fine. In fact, it's what I enjoy the most. But sometimes it's nice to just make something slightly less abstract, make it a little bit easier to understand, just to make sure that all your other abstract things don't go too mad. And we can get that little shadow in under both of our parasols, and now we've sort of unified those ideas. You can get a bit more murky shadow in the foreground. And a couple of these windows as well we can add more shadow to. And we're already sort of pretty well building up our scene, aren't we? We've got lots of interesting colours and interesting watercolour effects, and what I love about this style is that you celebrate the watercolours, you let them do their thing. You're sketching very loosely, very abstract, but you're letting the watercolours come to life on the page. Just going to move things around a little bit more, and a tiny bit more of this cobalt, which I rather like the effect of in a couple of places, where it's kind of pushing the other colour out of the way. And there we go. Is there anything else we could do? Well, I think a couple of little touches into our people, I think that would be good. I like popping sort of dense bit of something like quinacridone in as a sort of head colour, a face colour. And I feel that unifies people, and it shows us that these random marks are all the same thing in the background. I really think it just helps a bit. It also introduces a bit more light where we might have gone very murky. Could do a bit more moon glow above and below. And a bit more of our quinacridone just in a few places. Maybe even let's add some quinacridone to our foreground people. And there we go. So I'm going to call that sketch finished, I think. I'm going to let it dry and just see what these lovely pooled colours look like at the end. And of course, don't forget to pop your initials on. And there we go. This is our image pretty much dry. Not entirely, a couple of damp dots here and there, but pretty much dry. And what we've got is a fascinating, for me at least, fascinating distillation of a really complicated market scene down into a bit of an abstract, but for me, the essence of the scene. We've got the fruit and veg, we've got all these people, and we've got this kind of complicated, shadowy background as well. Hope you've enjoyed that. Please do let me know. Hit the like, subscribe buttons if you enjoy my content, and let me know in the comments what you think. Thank you very much for watching.